Good evening. I need a motion to call the meeting to order.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Ms. Wise. It's been moved and properly seconded by Ms. Wise. Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Val, Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Present.
Ms. Cousins.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Spirit of excellence. This season has been marked by extraordinary generosity. Our partners of Stiefel recently visited 4 St. Louis Public Schools elementary schools, Ames, Frable, Peabody, and Walbridge. As part of their Operation Warm initiative, each student was presented with a brand new coat, gloves, and a delightful assortment of goodies. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Stiefel for exemplifying the true spirit of the season. Kid Smart Year of Giving. Kid Smart has been a tremendous support to our community this year as well. This past Friday, they brought additional school supplies to students at Jefferson Elementary. This year, they have reached out to 1,221 of our teachers through various initiatives, including the $1 Million Back to School Drive, with approximately half of the participants being from SLPS, and the Light Up Learning Drive. The collective contribution from those efforts surpasses $2.1 million in donated school supplies. We are extremely grateful for the impact this group is having on our SLPS community. Dr. Scarlett.
Good evening. Tonight, the spirit of excellence shines on Vashon High School senior Chantrell Clayton. Excuse my voice. The senior was listed by the Post-Dispatch as one of 5 girls basketball players in the entire St. Louis region to watch this season. She has already committed to attending University of Illinois Chicago for college. Chantrell and the Lady Wolverines look to repeat as state champions this season. Also, I want to highlight the remarkable work of our Students in Transition Office under the leadership of Dr. Deidre Thomas Murray. This dedicated team is committed to providing essential resources to our most vulnerable families, many of whom are homeless. Throughout the holiday season, the Students in Transition Office has extended support to over 350 families, offering Thanksgiving meals, hygiene kits, cold weather resources, and thoughtful gifts. In fact, just this morning, this room we are sitting in right now was piled high with shoes and coats and more for the Students in Transition's annual Winter Wonderland Fest. Thousands of essential items were distributed just today. Thank you for your work. Finally, here are some upcoming calendar updates. Winter break for SLPS students and staff begin on Wednesday, December 20th, and extend until Tuesday, January 2nd. While the district central office will remain open for business during the break, it will close for Christmas holiday on Monday, December 25th and Tuesday, December 26th. Additionally, the central office will be closed on Monday, January 1st, in recognition of the New Year holiday. We encourage everyone to take time to be with loved ones, rest, and recharge.
Thank you, Dr. Scarlett. At this time, I'm going to ask Treasurer Adam Lane to come before us. At this time, I'm going to ask any of the board members if you have any questions or answers for Treasurer Lane, any additional questions or answers for Treasurer Lane in regards to the College Kids Funds Program.
Hi, Treasurer Lane. Just sort of in brief, I mean, you're aware of sort of the criticism, some constructive, some otherwise, of the College Kids program. Is your office, along with the city, looking at making any changes or improvements to the program? And if so, what are they?
Sure. Could you speak specifically to the criticism that you feel are constructive that you believe changes need to be made to?
Well, I think some of the questions are the account is in a non-interest bearing account, non-interest bearing for the student. And if you look at other programs around the country, they're invested in 529s, or there's a much easier way to transfer that money to 529s for an interest-bearing account. I think that's one of them. I think another one is if you look at some of the other programs and some of the research, which you've cited to in your previous answers, they talk about the education component, particularly regular and thorough updates on the balance, and particularly how the balances are growing as sort of that mental incentive to, oh, okay, if I put money in this account, it's going to grow, and we start with $50, we'll have more, because I think, as you've stated, the goal is 500 by the time somebody graduates. So are there ways to, because we know that the average is around, what, $75 if you take all of the students together, and it's been going on for a while. Are there things that you've looked at around other programs around the country where they've been able to grow those a little bit more, that you can try to improve the program that way?
Sure. So I can speak to the first, I'll answer them in sequence. So for the first part about the interest-bearing nature of the accounts, so right now if you walked into a banking institution, you would not be able to open an account for a student unless they were over 16 years old. So these are custodial accounts that we hold responsibility for and are held at all true in the student's name, and that allows us to open it in the student's name. They're not interest bearing. We do start with a $50 C deposit, but there are also no fees associated with the accounts. Because those incentive dollars are lumped into one account, the interest that's accrued on those go back to provide that interest pool for the students. You did mention that some other programs have 529s. Other states have 529s, so a 529 is a state-funded program, but there are no other programs like us that operate as a 529 because it's not a state program. So the other programs that are like us, which we are in great communication with, so the first one, which is in San Francisco, there's one in New York now and some other municipalities that are getting on the train of college savings accounts that are at the city level. None of those are interest-bearing, but there is an option to transfer that to a 529. You did mention, if you have more clarity on it not being an easy process to move that money to a 529. So we have a simple form that we created through Ultra Credit Union. All the family has to do is fill out that form and they can move that money to a 529. So I don't think it's a complicated process. It's one form, but if there's something you know that I don't, you can let me know.
So the answer is no, you're not looking at any changes to the program.
Not what I said, but I'm trying to get more clarity on what's the challenge or that you perceive with our form that we have to fill out and move it to a 529. We also host 529 sessions. So most 529 is also a partner. We have quarterly sessions so families can learn about how they can move it to a 529, whether that's in their best interest because of the tax implications of a 529. So in terms of what we're doing, I can speak to what we're doing with the program and moving it forward. One of the things that we've already instituted this year is students who have saved whatever they have in their account. A lot of the families, especially the families that are served by this district, don't have the ability to do summer programming because of the cost. So students can actually, and families can use these program funds to go directly to paying for a summer opportunity that they would otherwise not be able to participate in. We are also in talks with 2 financial firms to have an investment part of this so that students who have significant savings in their account can actually put it into an investment account, which would be to use your words, an interest-bearing account.
I don't have any other questions.
Is there any additional questions for Treasurer Lane? Board Member Hubbard?
It's well known that have never thought this was the greatest program, and particularly when the former treasurer used it to say she supported public education, which is, it supports children in publicly funded schools. That's different from supporting a public school district. But what was the purpose of starting this program? Why do we even do it?
Yep, I can speak to that. So I'll reiterate for those who might not have been able to hear it. The question was, what is the purpose of starting the program? So the program has one primary goal, and that is to make sure that students, or have a vessel for students to save at least $500 by the time they reach 12th grade. And the data behind that shows that students with at least $500 saved for college are 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to graduate. So the goal of the program is to supplement the efforts of this district and school systems in students achieving post-secondary success. It is also a financial literacy tool. So students actually earn $5, $10, $20 incentives by completing financial literacy activities. Most districts, including this one, does not have a formal K through 12 education or K through 12 financial literacy curriculum. So those are the 2 goals of the program. What we have found, to speak to Mr. Davis's early point, so overall on average the accounts are at that $70 level on average. With our oldest class, as the goal is that they get to 500 by the time they graduate, our oldest class has an average savings, our 8th graders have an average savings of $270, and they're still 4 full years away from graduation. So do we think we can hit that mark? Absolutely. But that is the goal of the program. We also know that $500 doesn't necessarily pay for everything that you need in college. But what it does show is that early savings, one, creates that vessel. So it creates this account in the family, especially in St. Louis, where we have one of the highest percentage of unbanked and underbanked low-income families. So it creates that asset, especially in a community where families do not traditionally have access to that asset. But it also creates other college-going activities. So the report also shows how students are more likely to engage in college-going programs, more likely to seek out other scholarships and scholarship opportunities, and engage in, again, pre-collegiate opportunities that help them advance to post-secondary success. And I would say at the basic level, if I am an uncle of a kid and I have $200 to spend on them for Christmas, maybe I'll put that $200 to a pair of shoes, but knowing that they have an account that's already set up that is saving for their post-secondary opportunities, I can also deposit that in their account.
Is there any additional questions for Treasurer Lane? Thank you, Treasurer Lane. At this time, there is a motion to invoke the 60-day notice provision of the cancellation of the College Kids Fund. I need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Ms. Henry.
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
No.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Dr. Scarlett.
So I'll be sharing a little bit about some data and research shifts. This will be along a series where we'll have some partners join us in January. And so this presentation is about data and research shifts in St. Louis public schools. Anyway, you get it. Well, someone's gonna click for me. Will it work if I do it? I've never done that before. Ooh, all right. It is magic. So, you know, this is an opportunity for us to really recalibrate what our relationship is with data as a school district. We're on the heels, or right now, map data is being sent out, publicized for broader public of our state assessment, measurement of our state measurement, excuse me. And it gives an opportunity for us to think about how are we aligning our data practices and our research practices with the future and the vision of our school district. So I'll be sharing a few things with our board and the broader public. First, we want to talk about just this sort of alignment and these cascading goals and priorities. The St. Louis Public Schools made a declaration that there would be 4 areas that they would prioritize. The first being student learning and achievement, accountability and progress monitoring, board discussion and decision making, and then also the board and superintendent relationship. Upon finding out these priorities and actually participating with the board when they made these priorities, I took that as a signal for areas that I would create for our own joint goals or collaborative goals for me as a superintendent, but also how we move forward as a school district. So one way to move forward is, I say in the spirit of Sankofa, of looking back before we look forward. There's been substantial work that has happened in our school district and our broader community to really help support outcomes for our students. And it's important for us to not just throw away those things, but to bring them into alignment as we move forward, because great work was done. Part of that is the alignment of our citywide plan for education, blueprint for education, and thinking about how do we personalize a citywide plan for our city school district, St. Louis Public Schools. This involves us looking at the 5 different areas from the citywide plan: infrastructure, health and wellness, workforce, school experience, and community, and aligning them to the pillars of the St. Louis Public Schools current transformation plan. Pillar 1 is excellent schools, aligned with infrastructure. Pillar 2, fairness and equity, which aligns with health and wellness. Pillar 3, leadership in connection with workforce. Pillar 4, read and succeed, connected with school experiences. And then Pillar 5, community engagement, which aligns with the community. So on August 22nd, our board voted to adopt 4 student success goals, and these have been guiding our actions as we move forward. Our flagship goal is 3rd grade reading, so early literacy, with 3rd grade being the benchmark area of us looking at data. There's 3rd grade mathematics, with also 8th grade mathematics that we're focused on. College and career readiness around access to advanced coursework and also positive placement. And then lastly, student wellness and belonging. We took that as an opportunity to think about our own portfolio of initiatives. These will be the initiatives that we progress monitor, that we share with the board, that we share with the public in order to be accountable for how we're using our resources, how we're using our time, and how we're tracking our outcomes in connection with equitable outcomes for students. So our portfolio initiatives includes our 3rd grade reading initiatives, a launch of our citywide literacy initiative in early 2024, a focus on predictable and efficient operations, particularly in 2 areas, procurement and transportation, the development of a new strategic plan, a 5-year plan from 2025 to 2030, and then also my role as chief communicator. So how do we have strategic communications, particularly around 2 areas, One is Proposition S bond levy, and then also the Citywide Literacy Initiative. So I like this graphic. I like the message of better together, but it also gives an opportunity for us to think about some of the complexity of our work as a system. So the first image, you see sort of a blob, right? There are arrows going in all different directions, and that represents St. Louis Public Schools right now in many ways. Each one of these arrows have activities that they think are very, very important. They're very hard-working arrows. They're working very hard. And they're all going in different directions. But we have a container of sorts, which is St. Louis Public Schools. And what we're pushing for is to get into formation, right? So Beyonce say, let's get in formation. So St. Louis Public Schools, we're doing the same. So if you look at the second image, what you see is we go from sort of a blob to the formation of an arrow, and inside it, the arrows are still going in different directions, but there is a formation. The formation that encompasses these arrows are really these goals that we have, and it's me, I believe, as a superintendent in my role to help galvanize the system around a common set of goals, to model, like a broken record, the type of outcomes that we need to move forward. It is a challenge, but I'm up for it. So soon as we transition, you see that third arrow. So not only is the shape of the arrow, but inside you start seeing the arrows moving into the right direction. But that's not even optimal. Optimizing means that these arrows are touching. They're moving in the same direction. They're not all separate entities moving in like cars, sort of moving, but we're all connected with each other. And so that interdependency between each other, the type of collaboration to create a learning organization is what is optimized. And that's when we can call ourselves excellent for our school system. And we'll really be able to see the outcomes that our students deserve. So in the course of us adopting our strategic goals and our strategic initiatives, we're also thinking about strategic values. What are the values that we hold dear that cuts across our student goals? Now, the teacher in me wants to get up and start kind of tracing some things, but I'll sit down. But I will sort of articulate to you what we call a theory of change. Now, all of us are operating in the theory of action. Every time we get up in the morning and whatever we set our course on, it is actually a theory of action. We're all operating, and sort of like those arrows, but we may be all going in different directions. So having a theory of change that helps to create a container for those theories of action is what helps a system move forward. So I will articulate very quickly a theory of change that helps you to understand where we're trying to move into. So we want excellence for our students, high quality education and outcomes for them. So the statement is, if St. Louis Public Schools supports highly effective educators and leaders and helps to produce them, if we ensure that our students are joyful and engaged as students, if we engage in authentic family and community partnership, if we provide personalized supports and innovative pathways, if we ensure we use equitable and multiple measurements, multiple sources of data, and if we provide college and career readiness opportunities to foster critical thinkers, then we'll have the outcomes that we're seeking for as a district. So I want to zoom in and make this relevant to the data, to this one area here around equitable and multiple sources of data. A few things I noticed when I inherited our previous superintendent's office was he had a lot of binders in there. Binders are a little bit of the bane of my existence, so never handed me a binder. I prefer to have it electronically so I can search the PDF. But there were binders and there were a lot of research reports, booklets from everywhere, booklets from WashU, SLU, national people, the bellwether people, just report after report after report, decade after decade after decade. Finally, I found a report from 1967. When I read it, the same narratives have been shared about St. Louis decade after decade after decade. Speaking about black children, black families, educational failure, over and over and over. Well, I am not afraid as a black woman to say that I am leading a district that is predominantly black children. It's 90% black children in this district. And black failure is big business in this nation. Narrating black failure, getting money for black failure, it is big business. Our children in St. Louis public schools are not for sale. So when I think about the data that we use in our system as we move forward, the type of research partnerships that we will have as we move forward, it is very important for me as a superintendent to articulate my values and what my expectations are, and to be able to share the same sentiments, I believe, with our board as well. So I am sharing a model with you. I hope you can see it. And it just sort of zooms into just thinking about third grade reading and the educational model for us to think about. I'm big on models and logic models. So a logic model is a theory of action, that you have inputs and you have outputs. And these inputs are very important. Now, you can't put clean water into a dirty system and expect different results, so we have to clean the system. So an example would be, for third grade reading, some inputs of working to improve educator literacy instruction capacity, ensuring that they understand different forms of teaching students, including the science of reading, or structured literacy instruction, having a P3 assessment portfolio, ensuring that our students have high dosage, high impact tutoring, which has been shown to give really strong gains for students, particularly within this pandemic. Ensuring that we have family and community partnership strategies and early learning pathways. There's such power in pre-K, and how we maximize our opportunity and investment in that. So those inputs are very important, because the data that we get from those inputs, of how do we actually track them, measurable inputs, it has to be good data. Now, we do have good data. MAP is good data. It's not the only thing that matters. We make it be the only thing that matters, but these statewide assessments are not the only thing that matters. And you have to measure what actually matters. We use STAR data, which gives us formative growth, and growth is very important. It's one of the values that our board has really focused on, proficiency and growth. Pre-K and K enrollment data, families wanting to have their children stay within St. Louis public schools and continuous enrollment. Our individualized reading success plans, and then opportunities for new future data. How do we look at the type of data that really helps to give a holistic view of our students? So using good data is only as good as its thoughtful analysis. Now notice in the second box, it's a cycle of inquiry, this thoughtful analysis. One thing that's not helpful, so within that, we focus on within group analysis, ensure that there's thoughtful comparisons. We focus on growth indicators, use strength-based data that is unbiased. So one of the things that is not helpful is sort of this articulation of a black versus white achievement gap. We should focus on what excellence is as a threshold, and we compare our students where they are instead of to each other. There are very different dynamics that play out for black and brown children in this country, and it's unfair to do measurement between that. But what I do believe is that St. Louis Public Schools isn't really serving their white children even to the level that we should be serving them. We could do much better. Our test scores are supposed to be the floor, not the ceiling. And so accreditation is the floor. It is not the ceiling. Our children are capable of so much more, and we have to raise our expectations for all of our children. Then lastly, compassionate understanding. Holistic, culturally aware, empathetic, justice-oriented, and humanistic. How do we have and apply compassionate understanding to that? So then we have measurable outputs. These are the things that we desire. We want to have more children, diverse children identified as gifted and talented, having less special education referrals, having higher instances of positive identity development and belonging, student engagement, improves test scores, attendance, parent satisfaction, and student satisfaction. Now, I think I'm pretty bright, but I did not create this framework. It was from Dr. Ivor Tolson. I'd be happy to share some of this research with the board. But this, me finding this framework really helped me to frame my thoughts and ideas about how do we work together to support data as we move forward. So a few things will be shifts in our partnerships, in the ways that we work with our partners, the ways that we work internally around our data. I'm really proud of the work that Chief Vanoy and Dr. Borshade primarily have been working with our school leaders to really build their data literacy and to help them to really understand how we use data for decision making. Our role, my role as the employee of this school board and as the leader of the school district is to ensure that I provide our school board good information. Good people with good information with an equity analysis make good decisions. This board has a lot of responsibility to make good policy decisions for our students in the operation of this $500 million organization. So we can't run it like a mom and pop shop. So we need to make sure that we really vet the type of information they have. I know that writing is so tiny, it looked right on the screen, so I'll read it aloud. The first shift is around research partnerships. We've inherited some research partnerships that are frankly stale. They just kind of rehash the same information over and over and over, and we just keep asking and asking and asking from our communities and never actually changing any practices. And then people get more research grants and they get to build their portfolio. We go on tenure tracks and all of this, again, articulating deficit narratives about Black children and brown children in this country. So we're really critically examining and working with research partners who will be closest to our children and families who have shared experiences, who are reflective of that, and who do work that is not, that is humanizing and that is balanced, focused on high expectations, but also how we work together. Next is being able to ensure that we gather insights from students and families. Our team has helped to develop a Superintendent Students Advisory Committee. I'm so excited. We have 2 student representatives from all the high schools. Those children are on fire. Those young people, those young leaders are on fire. I am so excited to hear about the insights, and they are just a little microcosm of the brilliance that we have. Every time I walk into a school, I get insights from young people about what we need to do differently. The third is centering the burden of responsibility on systems instead of families. Far too often, families and students are blamed as the source of issues when they've actually encountered so many different forms of oppression that there are core causal impacts to those things. And so we don't use the forms of oppression as excuses, but we have a compassionate understanding, and then we work together to still have high expectations and to work together to address our systemic issues that are impacting families in ways that we can use education to leverage greater justice for our students. The fourth is using leading indicators. A lot of times we use lagging indicators. These are like test scores, like MAP data, in order to make decisions. We need to use more leading indicators like attendance, student engagement, growth scores to help us to think about the areas that we can engage as well. The fifth one is assessing enabling conditions for equity. And I get so excited about this one because I think about the last board meeting. We had Theo and who was his principal, Dr. Borshade? What was the principal we had? Theo that we did the, that wasn't the principal. Oh, no, not the principal, the teacher that was with them. Oh, thank you, Teacher Grant. And so that young man, his family was here. They would show the video about the goal setting, and it allowed us to have a peering in of the enabling conditions, having high quality teachers, having parents that are engaged, a child having agency over their goal setting, him having a readerly life. That young man is doing great, and he is surrounded with a village that is ensuring that he's thriving. Every single child in Seattle, or excuse me, St. Louis, ha. Blame it on my cold medicine. Every single child in St. Louis needs to have the same enabling conditions. We call it a conspiracy of care around them to ensure that they're able to explode and achieve at high levels. The sixth is addressing harmful policies and exclusionary schooling practices through our work with data and research. And then lastly, I'm so excited about my role as the chief communicator for St. Louis Public Schools and my ability to be able to interrupt deficit narratives of St. Louis Public Schools. Now, Vice President Davis says sometimes that St. Louis as a city, but St. Louis Public Schools also suffers from a self-esteem problem. And so we're working on that self-esteem issue because we should feel esteemed. We have tremendous talent in our leadership core, in our educator core, in our students, in the families and communities that come from. And so I'm very excited for these opportunities to be able to do this work and present these new shifts in our system in service of equitable outcomes for our students. I don't know if the board has any questions for me.
Is there any questions for Dr. Squalid?
I just want to say thank you. I'm very excited.
Dr. Squalid?
Next, we'll have Chief Cheryl Van Noy. She'll come up and give some updates with the clicker around our MAP and APR release and just share a little bit about the timeline. Thank you, Chief Van Noy.
Thank you, Dr. Scarlett. Thank you, Board of Education. On the screen, you will see the information that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education published last week as it relates to releasing our annual performance report, or our APR. Today, there was a virtual meeting sponsored by the department to explain and update all who attended on that latest release. Tomorrow morning, the media will receive their information for each district across the state, and they are able to reach out to us with specific questions. However, they cannot release any information until Monday morning, the 18th, when the embargo is lifted, and that information will then become public. Late last week, Dr. Crapola and I had a phone conference with our communications consultant, SMJ, to review the information in preparation for the release. They provided really good feedback, and we've worked with George Sells and his department to have a press release ready to go with our narrative. So just a little background about the annual performance report. It is provided to every local education authority, LEA, or district in the state. It provides the results on academic achievement for all students and also for subgroups. And it also includes information on the growth model with all students and subgroups. This information includes the content areas of ELA, math, science, and social studies. And this year, they are releasing growth information on science and social studies, which they had not done previously. We also receive results on graduation rate, college career readiness, attendance, and other reporting metrics. DESE has shared that any reclassification will not occur until at least after the 23-24 data is released, which is a current school year. At that point, they will have 3 years of data. As we proceed past the 18th of December, which is Monday, we will be able to provide more detailed information in regards to this report once the embargo is lifted. At this point, I'll take any questions or clarifying information you might need.
Chief Van Noy, other than adding the social studies and science growth, is it going to be the same as last year?
Correct. There are a few more points available because of that new metric.
Dr. Dr. Scarlett. Thank you, Ms. Chief Van Noy.
My apologies, sorry. We had a hot consent agenda topic, excuse me. So next I'll ask Mr. Square Watson to come on up. He will be in Chief Angie Banks, so Chief Watson and Chief Angie Banks. Chief Watson is our Chief Operations Officer, and Chief Angie Banks is our Chief Financial Officer. And so they will be sharing just some information about procurement and our initiative on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Of course, Chief Watson and I, as mentioned, we're going to share some information on the procurement initiative, one of the operational goals for the district. And just from this slide, I mean, you can see that the students kind of in the yellow area, they look kind of intense, maybe perplexed. And then also the student with the goggles on, virtual reality goggles. I mean, they're just clearly just intrigued. So, I mean, that's really a good way to kind of kick this off, because I think some of us are kind of feeling that way. So today's agenda will include some high-level information on the procurement process, some of our challenges and opportunities that we look forward to, followed by any questions you might have. So, procurement, in its simplest form, is a fairly intuitive process of identifying a need for goods and services, creating that purchase requisition for those goods or services, perhaps requesting some pricing from suppliers that provide them, creating a purchase order, which is kind of like the contract between the buyer and the seller. Of course, the supplier provides those goods or services, the district, in this example, receives them, and then we pay the supplier. So that sounds simple, right? Simple in theory, but it's much more complicated than that. There are procurement rules and regulations, there's processes and people to contend with. So this graphic just has some of the challenges kind of from the finance perspective that I'll just tell you about, and then Chief Watson will give you another perspective of challenges. So, project approval. So is the project board approved? Is it in the board's budget, approved budget? And is it in the requester's budget? You know, that seems reasonable, right? That we have the money for it. Board resolution. Has the board resolution been created? Has it been approved by the board? Have the required numbers of quotes been obtained for whatever you're trying to purchase? Regarding vendor and contracts, is the vendor registered in the system yet? Has the contract been fully executed? Looking at Business Plus approval, which is our system of record, our ERP. Has the contract been entered into Business Plus, and have all the approvers signed off on it yet? Vendor payment. Have the goods and services been confirmed by the school and department? You know, we can't pay if somebody doesn't say they did it or we got it. Why do we have an invoice but we don't have a purchase order yet? And better yet, why is it 3 or 4 or 5 months after the service has been provided and the vendor hasn't been paid yet? So there's all types of things that can happen along the process.
So to kind of piggyback on what Chief Banks kind of mentioned in terms of their laborious process, from more or less board resolution to the point where we get to pay a vendor, I've listed some of the operational procurement challenges just as a whole. So just in process alone, it generally takes from the development of an RFP, request for proposal, request for information, request for qualifications, and or just an invitation to bid, up to a fully executed contracts, oftentimes 6 months. Within the 6 months process, we incur additional costs. So, for example, there may be an escalation or a price increase at the start of the year. There may be during the course of a year where a contractor may come, and some of the contractors that we may have had initially through our board recommendations for approval, they no longer have the workforce to actually complete the job, and just some of the nuances. And lastly, when it comes to the actual payment of a vendor, as Chief Banks just kind of mentioned, that anything sometimes beyond 60 days could really impact sometimes small business owners, in particular to our minority and women business owners that are looking to do work within the district, just in terms of being able to keep up with payroll, unlike some of the large corporations or large vendors. When it comes to some of the execution of the contracts, our subcontracting, the district at this current state and time does not have any contracts with any of our subcontractors. Oftentimes, this does impact us confirming either the cost, and also with the subcontractors, this sometimes prohibits them from doing future work within the district. As an example, one of the criteria when we send out an RFP, a request for proposal, is previous work within the district. So if they don't necessarily have a contract number or a vendor number, then they don't necessarily get the points that allow them to, in this matrix, when it comes to evaluating their particular proposal, to actually do future work in the district. And again, when it comes to the vendor payment, with the multiple layers within this Business Plus platform, multiple approval layers, somewhat kind of delays the process for us paying vendors in a timely manner. And these are some of the challenges when it comes to procurement, again, from development up to payment, that has caused some delays, and oftentimes we lose a lot of vendors, and we have a small pool of vendors just because, for lack of better words, people just don't want to do business with the district.
So we know that there are lots of things that we can do better. And I think it's always a great opportunity for professionals to come in and see what you're doing, to provide a fresh look, best practice review, and, probably some unseen things that we just can't see because we're so invested in what we're doing that we can't see the forest for the trees. So I have to say that this procurement initiative is something that I'm really looking forward to, especially as a partial owner of the process, which really the whole district owns the process, but procurement falls directly under me, and I know that it is a nut that I have not been able to crack, so I'm really looking forward to this initiative and what's going to happen over the next months and weeks and months. So, I mean, you can just see from this graphic, there are a number of benefits that are to be derived, and especially as we've talked about some of the issues that we currently have, we're really looking forward to this and think that it can actually be quite transformative. So I really just want to thank Dr. Scarlett for her vision and bringing it to the district, and we're all really looking forward to it. So, if you see the students now, you can see them. They're all happy, they're looking forward, they're delighted, they're engaged. I mean, and even the little guy sitting down with the pencil, he's just really into it. So, I mean, we're really just looking forward to this initiative, and we'll welcome any questions that you might have.
I don't necessarily have a question, I just have a comment. Actually, if I see you, Chief Banks, you're like the students. You're happy and excited and look forward to this process. So I thank you for your continuous commitment to leading this charge as well. I know this has been a struggle, but from 2.5 years since I've been on the board and seeing Chief Banks, the first time I started up until now, I can see the excitement. So I thank you and I commend you for your service. Any questions for Chief Banks or Chief Watson?
Mine is also not really a question, But I just appreciate so much that we are telling the truth about what is happening in the district. We're not going to get anywhere if we don't start with the truth. And this is obviously something that we haven't been doing well. And I hope that all the people here, that they know that we're making an effort to do better, and this leads us to have better relationships with all sorts of people around the city that know that we're going to actually fulfill our contracts and pay our bills. That seems like a really big deal, and I'm thankful they all are doing this work.
Any other questions or comments for Chief Banks or Chief Watson? I'm sorry, Secretary Jones, I didn't see you. You're so silent and soft over there.
Just want to say thank you so much. You know, I've looked forward to this over the years. It's been so many years coming. And I really appreciate you. You've been on so many boards, and Mr. Watson, the same thing with you. I mean, you listen, and you listen well, and I'm just proud of both of you all. Just want to say thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Dr. Scarlett?
Thank you so much, Chief Banks and Chief Watson. Next, I'll have Dr. Isaac Pollock will come up and give us a Confluence Academy update. Thank you, Dr. Pollock.
Absolutely. Good evening. I'm here tonight to provide a brief update, semesterly update on our work with Confluence Academy Charter School. Tonight we'll be going over a few items. The first is background on the Confluence sponsorship relationship. We'll talk about the role of SLPS as a sponsor, the cadence of updates that we'll be providing to Confluence's board as well as to this board. We'll go over some items that drive our core work around our feedback checklist, school visits, submission calendar, performance agreement, and next steps. Before I go on, I'd like to introduce someone who's been a tremendous addition to our work and a support for me in this role, and that is Ms. Latasha Smith, if you could stand up. So Ms. Latasha Smith has joined our team, has been a tremendous support for us, so I just want to say thank you. I'd also like to pause and say thank you to my leader, my leader as well, but to Dr. Borshade, who has been a tremendous thought leader, support, and has put herself amongst all the other responsibilities, has made time to support me in this work. So I just want to say thank you. We are in Confluence Academies has a 5-year contract with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It is currently in its 2nd year, and this is the 1st year of our sponsorship relationship. So we started in December of 2022. The sponsorship was approved by the Board of Education. We worked with DESE to re-up our sponsorship responsibilities and rights over the spring of 2023, and then we began our relationship with a signed contract in July of 2023. I'd like to pause here and just go over again the rationale for why I believe we made the recommendation and the board made the decision to accept this heavy responsibility. Confluence Academies was under the sponsorship of the University of Missouri. The University of Missouri made the choice to not sponsor schools anymore. And so that left Confluence up for, sort of not knowing where they were going to go. There's a large population of students. It was about 3,000 students, 2,500 students. And so at the time, there was a lot of concern that either they would go to a different sponsor that didn't share our values, or that those students would be flushed into the system and in a sudden way. We saw that with Imagine Academies several years ago, and we saw the detrimental effect that had on families, although we did pick up the pieces as best we could. And so we wanted to do our best to avoid that. I think in addition, the decision was that if someone was going to make a decision, that we thought that it was best for us as an organization to hold the keys to that decision. So I want to be clear, I think that was a lot of the decision making, and I can't speak for the board, but I believe that was the rationale behind it. So Confluence Academies has 5 campuses. You can see them on the board or in front of you. They include Aspire, which has transferred to a pre-K, transitioned to a pre-K through second school. Confluence Preparatory Academy, which is a 9 through 12. Grand Center Arts Academy, which is a 6 through 12. Old North, which is pre-K through 8. And South City, which is also pre-K through 8. You can see the population of each of the schools in the from last year, and then a similar time period this year. They've seen overall an enrollment steady, but there have been shifts in particular sites. 2 of the schools, which are Confluence Preparatory Academy and Old North, are considered comprehensive schools by the state. And so we work closely with them on their comprehensive plans, how they use their dollars, and we monitor that as well. So the role of, I want to be clear, the role of the SLPS as a sponsor is one of accountability. So St. Louis Public Schools is held accountable by DESE as a sponsor for holding Confluence Academies accountable to their goals and standards as outlined in the contractual agreement. So what that looks like is we do provide reports to this board and to the Board of Confluence. Throughout the year, we collect information through a feedback checklist. We do that through quarterly visits, a submission calendar of documents, and by observing board meetings and subcommittee meetings. The Confluence board currently has 6 members. They're required to have 3. They've had more before, but they currently have 6 board members. Finally, those items are feedback mechanisms that we can give. The high stakes measure is the performance agreement and annual evaluation. So every year we look at certain performance measures. Specifically, in the past it's been MAP, and moving forward it will likely be their local assessment. Which I'll get to in a second, and that is the high stakes evaluation piece. So in terms of updates, we provided an update to the Board of Education for Confluence Academies on October 19th, just explaining what the process was and how the cadence was going to go forward. And then we are planning to go back to them in the spring of 2024 to provide an update about how year 2 of the charter term turned out. We were here on June 13th to provide an update about sponsorship to this board. We are here now today to provide an additional update, and then we are anticipating to come back in the summer or at the very latest the fall, depending on when we can get the data, in order to provide a final evaluation result for their year 2. As a reminder, they will get data for their first 4 years. They're in year 2 now, and then the 5th year is when a decision must be made about whether we would recommend to renew their agreement to DESE. So part of what we do is we have a feedback checklist, which has 13 categories, over 300 different items that we look at, everything from, and you can see it in front of you, academic achievement and curriculum, facilities. We've walked every single square inch of their buildings and looked at tire treads and smoke detectors. We've been into classrooms to check for their checks for understanding, and so we're pretty thorough. And we do that all through observations, interviews, document reviews, and assessment data. We provide that information, a response of how that's going back to Confluence as a service to them. In addition, this will also help us to make sure that they are meeting all the legal requirements that are included in statute. So for instance, one example is statute requires the American flag to be posted in front of their buildings. So one of the items that we look for is the American flag in front of their buildings. For school visits, we did visit each of their campuses at the very beginning of school just to say hello, to introduce ourselves, to get a feel for what was happening, and to make sure that the campuses were operating smoothly. And then we have been back twice so far to all 5 campuses. For quarter 1, we were doing classroom visits and teacher interviews, and we decided to focus on academics to start because that is something that is central to our values. And then for quarter 2, we've completed our facilities walkthroughs, Starting in January, we'll be returning to classrooms. We'll be examining their IEP process and their human resources. And then in Q4, we will be reviewing their curriculum, their professional development, technology, strategic planning, and board leadership. They're currently going through a strategic planning process in this spring, they will hope to complete that into the summer. In addition, we have a submission calendar that they are required to submit certain documents to us. We provided them a calendar at the beginning of the year. They've completed their July, August, and September through December submissions. We've reviewed the January deliverables, and we have the rest laid out for the year. An example of this is statute requires them to submit an audit, to have an audit completed. So one of the things we ask for is proof that the audit was completed by a third party and submitted to the newspaper, which is a requirement. Finally, the performance agreement. So the performance agreement, as was originally intended, was to hold them accountable to the same things that we're held accountable to by the state, which is a 70% APR. Confluence participates in a program called the Success Ready Students Network. That is a group of school districts, and Confluence is one charter school that participates. They receive a waiver from the state where MAP will not count for them for 3 years for those districts. In replacement of that, they're working with a professor from a different area in order to establish what local assessments could look like in order to replace the MAP. So what this means is that Confluence will still take the MAP assessment. They will still receive an MSIP-6 APR results, and that MSIP-6 will still count for federal purposes, including for comprehensive status identification. They will also receive, over those 3 years, an alternative APR based on their local assessments, and they take the NWA assessment. The alternative APR system will be collaboratively developed over the next 3 years with DESE and other SSRN districts. So what this means is that we can't use the MAP to evaluate them, because that's what their waiver is. The alternative APR isn't ready yet, and so we are in the final throes of a negotiation with them to identify what standards we will hold them accountable to. We've had multiple conversations with them, and we're looking forward to a final vote at the board meeting on December 14th. So next steps for us as an office, we're going to continue the work that we're doing. We're going to work to get an executed performance agreement. We're going to continue with the Q3 and Q4 site visits. We're going to collect the documents as we've outlined, and then we look forward to providing this board with an annual report at the end of either the summer or the fall. So I'll stop there and ask for what questions there may be.
Is there any questions for Dr. Pollack?
I have a question about the Success Ready Network. So I think it's in the statute that part of the, and maybe this is in performance agreement, but part of the measurement is that the charter school has to, in some metric, outperform on the MAP test the local district. So how does that change things? They're taking the MAP, but they're not using it. So how will they measure apples to apples then? Or are we just throwing that out?
No, it's a great question. So what we're looking for, to your point, we can't compare those states, giving them a waiver that says that MAP won't be used for high stakes accountability. What we're going to do instead is use their NWA local assessment, and that has a national norm level. And so what we're intending to do is to compare them to the national norms of students who have scored like their students did in the beginning of the year, compared to the growth that those students have seen. And so that's our intent.
Secretary Jones.
Yes. Excuse me. This is more so of one question and then a suggestion. But the question is under school visits. I see everything that you listed here, but my one concern is, question is, who is doing the mental health checkup when you go for your school visits? Because I've talked to a couple people that dealt with or deal with these schools or a couple of those schools, and they're very concerned about the mental health of the students there, as well as the facilities being accessible to handicap and clean, that kind of thing. But more so, even just say, for instance, if a student needs to go to the nurse's office and they're understaffed and they don't have the services that the student needs, and many of them are not able to function in the classroom because of that. So I saw the school visits, but I wanted to know, in your document, did you have someone to do the checklist with the medical as well? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So one of the very first things we heard when we visited one of the schools in particular was that concern. Actually, that the principal brought up that concern themselves, specifically around the mental health struggles that their students have been facing, and they brought that to us. So I think that is top of mind. Our current structure that we're using, when we started the year, we had this plan. As we've gone through, we've realized that there are things that we have missed that we could look for. And so we are excited to review what our measures are for next year and to make sure that we're looking at all of the things. And so I think mental health is certainly one that we want to look at, and that we should make sure it's added to that. In terms of adequate staffing, so that is in the Q3. So one of the things that we'll be looking at in Q3, they'll be submitting to us their staffing models and their compensation models, their salary models, so we can say this is or is not adequately staffed.
Okay, the last part, I guess, was handicap accessible, like some of the students who needed to go up to class and they needed a wheelchair or something, or were not able to climb the steps or something. What did you guys come up with?
Thank you. So what we do look at, one of the measures on the facilities walkthrough is that the facility is ADA accessible, and then one of the other measures is that the elevators are operational. When there has been an issue with elevators being accessible, that's something that we mark and feedback that we do give to them. So that is something that we are actively looking for.
So when it's marked, do they have a certain time frame to adjust it or to rectify it, or what's done about it?
Sure. So I will, I think there's two pieces here. One is throughout all of our walkthroughs, we are joined by a member, the appropriate member of their staff. So on the academic side, we were joined by the school principal. On the facilities side, we were joined by their head of facilities. When there has been an issue, that head of facilities we've seen him address it in real time where possible. However, there are some things that are, right, they operate in some old buildings, that some of their buildings they don't own and have control over. And so they have had, to Board Member Jones' point, some facilities issues that have come up. And so we are looking forward to providing that report to them in January for them to follow up with us about how they've addressed those.
So I'm just curious, in order for them to be actually placed in the building, in the facility, they have to be ADA approved, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the problem is that there's some issues with, like, they're probably malfunctioning some, okay.
Correct.
So the problem is they probably need some updates or some repairs to the.
It could be that. It could be there was a situation where about handicap parking, and then they had one versus how many spots they need.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing where there's accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Is it sufficient? Is it enough? Is there something that's stopping it in this moment?
Okay.
But we haven't found anything. I think we would act immediately, and that's part of our contract. If there's anything that we felt that would create an unsafe situation, our contract says that we would act immediately.
Okay. Any additional questions for Dr. Pollack? Board Member Hubbard?
Do you get the feeling that the supervising, what's the real word, accountability that you're providing is more intense and perhaps better than what they were receiving from their other sponsor?
So Mizzou, the University of Missouri had the reason why they gave, one of the reasons why they gave up sponsorship, my understanding is that there were findings against them in other situations, and so we have not used them as a model at all. We have, so yes, I think we feel very comfortable that we are providing the appropriate level of feedback to the school, to Confluence, but also providing the appropriate level of accountability. I think one of the words that has been used in the past is that we see their success as important. I think that is something that is important to us. So we do see their success as important. However, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to hold them accountable. And so I think we are holding both those truths.
Thank you, Dr. Pollack.
Thank you.
Ms. Henry, did you have the? We're going to move things just a little bit. Vice President Davis, you're going to, if you can, could you go ahead and do your legislative platform presentation?
Okay, well, we'll post the PowerPoint because we don't have it, but it's short, and the board members should have a copy. We are yesterday, we had our second meeting this year of the legislative committee. In our first meeting in November, we adopted some changes we suggested some changes to the legislative platform. Yesterday, we adopted those changes, and so what I'm going to review those with the board, and we're going to ask the board to adopt that as the Board of Education's legislative platform. We do this prior to the start of the legislative session, which in 2024 will begin on January 3rd. So as we go through, there's just a few legislative platform changes. The legislative platform is posted on our website, slops.org/legislative. The first one comes on page 1 under trauma and homelessness. We're changing bullet point number 3 to change the first sentence to read, adding a new category for a weighted factor for transient students, those students with a high mobility rate and or students who are classified as homeless of 25%. What we've asked for in our platform for a number of years is to add to the Missouri State funding formula a weighted factor for transient students that would be our students in transition. Right now there is a weighted factor for free and reduced lunch. I'm sorry, that's not, there's a weighted factor for a number of things. For example, for special education. We would like to add, in addition to that, for students in transition, there's currently not a weighted factor in how much we are reimbursed by the state. And I'm happy to say that this bill has actually already been filed this year. And so I don't have the bill number in front of me, but we'll continue to follow that as we go along. Our next one is also on page 1 regarding virtual programs. These have changed in terms of, as the legislation has changed through the years, is what we've seen having been filed and things that have passed. So we're adding 2 bullet points asking to cap the amount paid per credit hour to the cost of what the district is paying for their in-district provider. In previous years, up to last year, the district would be required in the MOCAP program to pick one provider, and all students were required to pick that provider. They expanded that last year, so really any of the Missouri-approved providers, a student could choose that under the MOCAP program. The concern is that you will find some of these virtual providers to sort of exploit that and raise the cost for the district. So we're asking for protections to make sure that costs are capped at what the provider charges that we have selected to be our primary MOCAP provider. The second one is we will support efforts to stop virtual providers from becoming virtual charter schools statewide and from becoming their own LEA attendance centers. Again, that relates very much to controlling funding and the cost of these providers. If they were able to become their own LEAs, they would get reimbursed on the same level as a brick and mortar institution while certainly not having the same expenses. The next one is regarding local control. It's on page 2. We're adding a new bullet point, legislation that gives the State Board of Education the power to make a final determination on whether to allow new charter schools to open within existing local school districts. This is sort of language that conforms and changes a little bit relating to one of our legislative priorities for the last year and this year, and that is to grant the state board more regulatory authority to stop charter school applications if they don't have some sort of demonstration of a community need. The next one is regarding, on page 4, we're changing the virtual provider heading to Empowerment Scholarship account, otherwise known as school vouchers. This is going to be a big year for Empowerment Scholarship accounts. There have already been many bills that have filed. So we are opposing expanding ESA programs with additional taxpayer dollars, and we're opposing changing or expanding any student eligibility for ESA programs and any statewide expansion. Currently, these are funded with tax credits. The proposals that we see coming down are going to be funded, some of them with dollars that go into LEAs. So we are opposing those. So those are the changes for the legislative platform. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions or discussion on those. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, you just made me feel 60 years old.
Okay, Emily.
How did we come up with the idea of a high mobility rate as being a new category?
How do we come up with it? The committee came up with that actually. I think that's actually was in our legislative platform that existed before I did, and I think it was originally just to add mobility rate as one of those weighted factors. And now it's very possible and even likely that you can't qualify multiple times, so it's very possible that a lot of our students in transition would qualify under a different category. And so with that, I think we've looked at adding a percentage to it. And the 25% we do believe would increase some of our compensation. But again, it's just because, like, as Dr. Scarlett was talking about, the Students in Transition Office, had this today. I mean, we have the highest, federal definition of homeless, McKinney-Vento population in the state by multiples. And so we know that there's additional costs, and there's probably even additional opportunities of services we could provide. So if we can find a way to get additional funding from the state for that, we think that would be helpful. And so the 25%, we'll have to ask Mr. Carroll. Part of it's negotiation, part of it is a very educated guess on what percentage would move the needle. Any other questions? With that, I would like to make a motion to adopt the 2024 legislative platform.
Second.
Any discussions? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
And just really quick, I did want to go over our legislative priorities. This year, the committee has broken off into subcommittees. So each one of our legislative priorities have a subcommittee, and they're looking at those issues. And so we'll be working on that throughout the year through the legislative committee, and I'm sure at the end of the year coming back and having some additional reports about that. And our 4 legislative priorities are trauma support, housing insecurity, charter school education, and we've added one this year for special education funding. So thank you.
So Vice President Davis, you basically did your report as well as everything else. Is there anything else you'd like to add, sir?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Now on to the consent agenda. Is there any items that need to be pulled separate from the consent agenda? Right there, that says new. I would like item 12-2309 pulled. Is there any other items that need to be pulled separately? None being pulled from that point. I need items 12-2301 up to 12-2308. I need a motion for a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussions? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
motion passed.
Item 12-2309.
I'll move to approve 12-2309.
Is there a second? Any discussions? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes, Ms. Weiss,
12-2309 on.
Is there a discussion?
We're pulling 2309, correct?
Is there a discussion for 12-2309 to approve memorandum of understanding with the Community Partners Network to support designee? This should be on the new consent agenda, 12-2309.
We're pulling that, correct?
Yes, to
Okay.
vote separately. We're pulling it to vote separately. Here.
I'm like,
Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes, Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
No.
Mr. Davis,
no.
Ms. Cousins,
No.
motion failed.
I'll make a motion to approve 12-12-2310 through 12-12-2313.
Is there a second?
Second, sorry.
Any discussions? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
motion passed.
Did I do that right? Call my vote.
We're going to move into the board members' report. Before we go to the board members' report, I want to go into a discussion for item 12-2309. I want the record to show that this was an initiative that was brought in up under the previous superintendent, and I want to make sure everyone understands that there was a lot of false narrative that has been going around. The board has no plan to close any schools. I repeat, the board has no plan to close any schools. Ashland and Merrimack will continue to receive comprehensive district support, encompassing network superintendent's assistance, district curriculum guidance, and coaching from academic instructional coaches. Additionally, during the second semester, the district will introduce interventionist programming with both of these schools choosing as pilot schools for this initiative. As note, if the CPN MOU, which we just voted on, is not approved, Ashland and Merrimack will remain open Ashland and Merrimack School will remain open and continue to operate as a SLPS school. In January, up under the initiative of Dr. Scarlett and her team, we will share more about the Professional Learning Interventionist Program and expanded learning opportunities at R4 pilot schools. I just want to make sure everyone is clear. The goal was never, ever to close any of the schools, not Merrimack nor Ashland. Thank you. Any board reports? Are there any board reports?
Can I also have a discussion on
Sure.
the CPN one? I just want to tell, I'm a parent at Merrimack. I've seen a CPN work. I've seen the ways that the CPN board has been stymied. And I just want to tell the teachers and administrators and families of those schools that I'm so sorry. Y'all put so much work into this. And I regret that I couldn't keep it going for you all.
If I could have some discussion as well.
Sure.
Just because, you know, we've been living with this for, I mean, I feel like I've been living this since I've been on the board. I mean, I wouldn't vote to end this if I thought that anything at the school that was working well was going to change. And I think we've had that assurance from the administration, from Dr. Borshade and Dr. Scarlett. And, you know, I think it's time to just move past sort of the noise of the CPN, of the politics that brought it before us. And we now have an administration that isn't going to rely on these crutches, asking for privatization partners to come in and save us, or trying some sort of new technique that they think was politically sophisticated. You know, like you said earlier, Ms. Hubbard, it's time for some transparency, it's time for some honesty. And those two schools deserve everything that every other school in this district deserves. Every kid needs supports, every kid needs quality in our schools, and we don't need you know, a separate board to do it. We have the power to do it. We were elected to do this for every one of our schools. And so I don't see this as bad news. I see this as a great opportunity to take what was working and fulfill the promise of what we were given, that we can scale these working things to every school for every student.
I sure hope so.
I'm sorry, I thought you had something. Are there any other board reports? Because you guys just made that a board report. That wasn't a board report. Are there any other board reports?
I have one professional development request. It's for the COSBA conference in Dallas, and as is our practice to make that a board request for the entire board to attend. It's February 23rd through 25th. And I am asking in particular for myself because I have been asked to speak along with Linda Quinley for MSBA on regarding her efficiency study, and so I'm making that motion to approve the professional development request for COSBA in February in Dallas.
I make a motion to approve the COSBA professional development in February 23rd to 25th. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Heights?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
If there are no board reports, we will go on into public comments.
I'm sorry, President.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
No, it's okay.
Board-
I was just gonna let everyone know that we did hold a Prop S committee meeting last Thursday, and we're given updates by Mr. Square Watson about where we are in that process. So, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more reports, we're going to go into public comment. Please be mindful, our speakers, you have 3 minutes. And we will start with you, Mr. Monroe. You got my timer.
Good evening. Dr. Scarlett, your presentation with a 2019 date on it, that's sad. But that's your plan for us coming into this distorted St. Louis Public Schools. And I think you need to reach out to those of us in the community, and it's not being done. I have in front of me a 2-page complaint that I filed against this board on the last board meeting, and I've heard no response. When you sign in at that board, you sign in and whether or not you want a response to your request. Well, I gave you a 2-page document on the last board meeting, and no response have I had. And let me say this. We are equipped as a St. Louis Public Schools to do something for the young black boys in our community. Our children are dying at an unprecedented rate out here, and there needs to be schools and lessons taught that are pertinent to them, and it's not being done. Now, I've asked you on more than one occasion for a report on your strategy with these vacant school buildings. We have enough school buildings out here vacant in the black community where we can put dormitories in here for our children and teach our young boys, put hammers and saws in their hand, and they take a gun out of their hand. And you're not looking at what's going on. The St. Louis Public Schools, you have everything there is to change the lives of our young people in this community, and you ignore it. And you ignore it. Will you answer this document, or shall I read it again? Or are you going to ignore it like you ignore many issues that black men bring to you? And as far as that CPN, I filed a complaint against you on that too with the whistleblowers because there's been some dishonesty about that thing that's been going on for a couple of years. Will you answer this document? I heard you, Ms. Cousins, on the last meeting, how sorry you were for the issue.
Mr. Monroe, I'm sorry,
Yes.
I don't think you're supposed to mention anyone's name when you're providing public comment.
Is that the problem? What name did I mention that I shouldn't mention? Our children are dying in the street. We have the ability to take school buildings and make them into a dormitory. We got vacant school buildings in my community. I walk past them every day, and you're not listening to it. And you worried about me shouting somebody's name? We got children dying in the streets, boys hijacking and carjacking. And you worried about somebody calling a name? My God. Do I get an answer for this document about the vacant school buildings and my request to take 2 of these school buildings and make them dormitories and learning centers for our children? Ms. Scarlett, that should be your focus. That's got to be a focus. And when you tell a man like me, Bill Monroe, the founder of the first black charter school in this town, that I cannot have a seat at the planning board, and that's not an issue.
Thank you, Mr.
That's the
Monroe.
crime.
Thank you, Ms. Monroe.
You don't mean it.
Okay, thank you.
And you brothers out here
Mr.
from
James
Sumner
Gibbs.
and Vashon, you better stand up and take notice
Mr.
of what's going
James
on.
Gibbs.
All right? Nobody's listening to you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Greetings, everyone. To the St. Louis Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Scarlett, Board of Education members, I am here on behalf of the Vashon Unified Alumni, its members, the students of Vashon, and as a concerned taxpayer. It has been raised and stated in this and other cities that the government states that if you see something, report it. Well, it appears that when it comes down to the issue of Vashon High School and the St. Louis Public Board of Education, not only do you want us to report it, but you want us to put a verbal or written report in with it. Effective communication is something that is taught in schools, and we as the alumni citywide would like to see that we achieve this type of status with the school board. I first spoke with the school board meeting back on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. At that time, I made a public comment asking why the Vashon basketball team was not allowed to do fundraisers for the trip to Hawaii. As of today, we, the Vashon alumni, still have not received a reply. I was told that I didn't need to turn in a report at that meeting, the written communication, and it was not accepted by the security guard. I offered the report at that time, and he didn't accept it. Okay, bear with me. So tonight, I have a list of concerns at Vashon regarding security, building repair, etc., that we feel have been neglected and need your attention. More importantly, to let us know that we, the taxpayer, are getting our just due from you, the school board committee, for maintaining our public schools as spelled out by law. Vashon High School is a great institution and deserves more than what the board is giving it. We wish that the correction could be done overnight, but we know it won't. This issue did not suddenly appear before your eyesight. As responsible board members, you should see what is going on to these institutions and that you have sworn to support. A casual walk out of the office to visit these schools will be an eye-opener to see what is going on and what needs to be addressed. I do believe it should be a part of your sworn duty, if not. The Vashon alumni would like to meet with President Cousin, Vice President Davis, or any board member assigned to this issue. We are asking for someone to contact us right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan Lindsay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here with my wife, Stacy. I'm representing Merrimack Elementary, and obviously was here to see what the decision would be on the CPN. I was going to speak on it from a point of neutrality because I don't envy any of you having to listen to a PowerPoint presentation about sponsoring a charter school and then making a decision later on about whether to get rid of the CPN model that actually has demonstrated gains in learning at Merrimack Elementary. I think that you guys are faced with many difficult choices every day. What I do want to highlight is one of the questions posed by the CPN presentation at last month's Board of Education meeting was what was going to replace it if it wasn't there. And I think we heard a little bit about that today, and we heard a little bit about the goal being that what the students at Merrimack Elementary have should be what the students at every school in the city of St. Louis have. But we know that the system is not set up equally, that parents have to navigate St. Louis public schools because of certain pathways that have focused resources and allocation of wealth into certain schools. And so it is not going to be as easy as it was said to make sure that all of our neighborhood schools have the ability to do reading intervention. That was what was happening at Merrimack Elementary. We had teachers there who were pivoting their time to teach kids who were on path and then going and doing intervention at, say, the second grade level so that you could see gains in the third grade. There was innovative stuff going on there. And too often, the city of St. Louis throws out the baby with the political bathwater. It happens all the time. And so I would highly encourage you to take a look at what was working well and then look at the other part of the equation. What were the resources that had to go into Merrimack Elementary to see those gains in the test scores? A 28 position rank increase among all elementary schools in science over 3 years, 13 position rank increase in ELA. That's demonstrated success. I think we need to talk to the CPN about the resources that went into that and how that can be modeled. And I am certainly excited for what Dr. Scarlett has to say about what values are going to be put into place. I will tell you that it was not an easy decision for my wife and I to look at our neighborhood school first. We are cultured to look everywhere else, to look at the choice schools, to look at the magnet schools, the gifted program. We met Principal Strong, who told us about what I would describe as a conspiracy of care before we knew it was connected with the CPN. He was talking about finding community resources through our business association to do place-based learning in the neighborhood. And that was a light bulb for me, and I said, I want my kid to go there because the school values its neighborhood, it values every kid, and it will give my kid a great education. And so I encourage you to look at what it was doing well to make sure that those models can be scaled.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Ms. Stacy Harvington.
Hello, good evening. I don't have much time to take. I just wanted to make a conversation. I appreciate, Mr. Davis, your comment about looking to what did work in the CPN model and seeing if we can scale that across the district. And I think that's the right thing to do at this point in the process and where we are in time. And I just hope that we put some real guidelines in place and a real framework to actually put that into action and execute on that suggestion. So it's a suggestion. Would love to see it executed on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harvington. Greg, I know I'm saying it wrong. Michelle? Reverend Charles Norris?
Good evening. I had come to speak on behalf of the Finish Line program, just my support for it, but I see that it was approved because it did more than just help my son to get past the finish line, but to thrive. And I just think it's something that a number of students don't really understand, how they can start their college career with 6 credit hours potentially and not be in an AP course. And so I think that's something that we should really work on the marketing for that to help those students understand that this is something that can really be helpful for them and reduce their college costs. Secondly, I'd like to, I was encouraged by what Dr. Scarlett's vision was. There were 2 things that really stood out to me. One in the inputs were families. We have too many children that are struggling with literacy because at times literacy is an issue in the family. And so to have families as a part of that. And then the second piece is having early childhood development programs, early childhood learning programs is so critically important because so many of our children are coming to kindergarten not really being prepared, ready to start, not knowing their letters and their numbers and their colors and those kinds of things. So as much as that can occur, we as the church and the clergy will be greatly appreciated. And as I've said before, we're willing to look at our Sunday schools and other venues to see how we can be a part of the literacy program. And lastly, each year the Clergy Coalition, we name a community partner of the year. And I'm here to tell you that St. Louis Public Schools has been named as our community partner of the year. And so that award will be available on this Thursday evening and announced at our annual Christmas dinner. God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Norris. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes? Yes. Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
You are adjourned. Ms. Harvington, would you mind? Thank you. Mr. Gibbs, would you mind? A word.